Hi, folks. Um, Thanks so much for being here, and thanks for the encouragement. It makes things happen. It does something for me that's important. Um, I don't think I have anything to say for my own sake. I think I only um, am moved by others. I have so much incredible stuff to lay out. Um, I don't know if I got time in the lifetime, but anyway, I got inspired by um, uh, a couple that's asked me to help them. Um, and I'm at the place where I have recognized that they're going through the same thing that all of us are going through. So I want to ask you to think about an idea here about all of the suffering that any of us ever experiences in any relationship. In other words, I'm actually going to try and spend a few minutes here and offer you a way to think about it, which I promise you is totally and completely transforming. And I promise you can produce such results if you apply it with some earnestness and some depth and some surrender and commitment to it. And I'll say that what I'm going to be talking about, it feels like it's always been native to me at some deep level. My ability to articulate it and give it a structure didn't come from me. I am a student of a thing called A Course in Miracles, and I have been since before my adult life began. And this has stood the test of time. And the same as always, if you feel like this is worthy of more development, in other words, if you'd like to hear more about this, or you have a question about it, or you want some part of it to be unpacked in detail, please let me know, because at this stage I want to keep these videos to a certain size for many reasons. But we can do more later, and there may be some live events that we should do. Anyway, the idea is this, that so the couple I'm working with has disappointment and suffering and complaints with each other. And you may have heard that there is this old expression, do you want to be right or happy? Which is worth unpacking and really, really working with. And I think it needs to be. But to be more effective, I'd like you to consider this possibility, that the path to my release from suffering is in my willingness to be wrong about the person I'm having troubles with, the person who's causing suffering to me in my life. This is the radical leap. And I want to say to you to think this out for yourself. I'm going to tell you the punchline, but none of these things work unless we do it for ourselves. The punchline is that we allow ourselves to become convinced that we are right about what is true and what ain't right about the person who is upsetting us or disappointing us. And I mean this to include, the Course means this to include, even when everyone would agree that this person is doing something terrible. It could be physically or verbally or emotionally abusive. But here I am with this possession, this relationship, and so my hopes for longing and intimacy and connection and wholeness and love are giving me the experience of hugging a porcupine. Once this has happened, then I'm likely to make the next natural leap, which is, I wish this person would somehow change, somehow improve. And I wish they'd be different. I wish they'd stop that. I wish they'd care. I wish they'd act like they care. I wish they'd see how terrible it is. I wish they could make how what it does to me matter. And we get caught up in this. No matter what the circumstance is, that place cannot possibly ever produce a result for any of us ever, and never has. In other words, if we look at this materialistically, if we look at it legalistically, if we look at it in terms of coercion or bargaining or influence or persuasion or even treatment, we're losing out on everything that the soul is holding out for us and each other. The Course's remedy to this is that I ask, I pray, I look inside, I beg to be given a new perception of what this is, by being able to see the person and what they are experiencing differently than I am. In other words, even if it's 3 Japanese monkeys that are famous for the hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil. Once I'm having an experience that another person is terrible, which may be observable, and I want to be right about this. In other words, I become attached to the fact that it's true. I've now become the celebrator of my own victimhood, and I'm likely to become the celebrator of my self-righteousness. And though the situation makes me unhappy, I will find myself probably, and you may have heard this from yourself and others, I'll find myself describing it as not my fault and impossible and unworkable. And the other person is the problem, and this is causing me a lot of suffering because I'm not getting what I want. And don't worry, there's a part 2 to this. So if you're Christian in statement, you could say, Holy Spirit, please give me a new way to look at this. I would rather have peace than this. I'll do another video on what I call transpersonal empathy, which is the result of a deep, deep, deep desire to do everything I can to try and be in the other person's shoes, no matter what they're doing. As long as I want to be right about what's wrong about another person, there's no hope. Once I'm willing to become influenced to a deeper or better understanding, or by seeking it and asking the other party to help me with it, or to pray to be given it, I'm usually going to have access to helping the other person feel seen and accepted, and may even lead them to the question I'm asking, which is, what's really going on the inside at a deeper level? In other words, what precedes this behavior that's upsetting? It's this: let me not see the other party as evil. Let me not see myself as being victimized. Let me see that all that's happening in the human race ever is a misperception and a miscommunication and a misunderstanding. That underneath all the skin and the eyes and the bones, another version of ourselves is having an experience. Now, the part 2 of this has a requirement, and that is that the relationship may have to change form. Very often we're so attached to relationship and getting something out of it or keeping it, we're using it, we're benefiting from it. It's a source of something for us. And so we become disabled from our own capacity to negotiate for our happiness, because we say, well, I have to and want to, and I'm committed to having this person close to me in this way, in this kind of relationship. But I'm not willing to give up my opinion that there's something fundamentally wrong about them that's making it horrible. This is just, it's an impossible set of terms. There's a famous psychologist who says, I can take one of three positions in a relationship: a master, a slave, or a negotiator. And see, the negotiator can meet another person as an equal and respect them as an equal. In other words, someone who wants to be freed of complaining of being in a slave position in the relationship can simply say, I can't have it this way, and unless you're willing to do this thing, then I may have to change this relationship by being physically somewhere else where these bad things don't happen to me. In other words, the negotiator says, I give it to you. In order for me to be happy, I need you to start doing this or stop doing that. And it's a very fair thing, because then the other party is at liberty to say, well, I'm not willing to do that to have you be close to me. I'm not willing or able to stop doing that in order for you to be close to me. It simply becomes a fact for two people to accept. But if I want to embrace the paranoid alligator and then complain that it bites me and call it a relationship problem, I'm not making any sense. So the first part is to really check for myself, check with myself. Am I actually getting a little bit of a self-righteous thrill about being excited in my victimhood that I'm really right, that this person is doing something terrible? Because if I'm getting something out of it and I'm not asking for what I want or negotiating for it, in other words, that we're not really getting into a real conversation. And what I'm finding with the couple I'm working with is that both parties have a lot to say about how the other person is making it difficult. But both parties cling on to the teeth and the porcupine and describe their suffering at length. It makes everything impossible and actually sort of pointless forever and might go on for lifetimes. I have to really, really want my happiness, and I have to be willing to meet the other person's moral agency as an equal and say, hey, I need this to stop, or I need this to begin. And if not, my happiness says I have to choose my happiness somewhere else. But there's no hatred or violence or judgment or criticism in it. It's just, this doesn't work for me. It's too much suffering for me to bear. And each one of us is always deciding how much suffering we're excited about bearing. Wasn't it Bob Marley who said, you're going to suffer, you just got to choose the ones worth suffering for? And how much? With a real desire to be forgiving of the fact that we're all clumsy and traumatized and clueless and don't know what we don't know and out of control, we're all going to be stepping on each other's toes, and we're going to be making mistakes as human beings. We're so deluded. and asleep at the wheel until somebody shakes us and says, "You're doing that thing. Are you willing and interested in stopping? Do you want to, for my sake or your sake?" If we take responsibility for our part in this and not want to, if I'm making the same complaints over and over again and the other person isn't changing, I've bought onto the merry-go-round. And I'm just on the merry-go-round saying, like, God, this is a really shitty horse. We have to find ways to reach through all of our shadows and misperceptions and mistakes and confusions. We have to have the desire to do that for ourselves and others. Or we're just letting the problems rule us without choosing the beautiful that's possible in us or the beautiful that's possible in the others. We have to be looking for the best in others even when they're at their worst. And if it turns out that the fates have it that a certain thing isn't possible, then I can love this person and it's not their fault. Because people, we don't owe each other anything. And then I can say, I need this relationship to be different for reasons which you are not to be blamed for, because everybody is being themselves. We can offer each other acceptance and negotiate the terms of relationship without any vengeance or judgment or resentment. It's not necessary. I don't want to see or say that this person is evil and terrible. If I do, I'm doing them in and I'm doing myself in with this story. So what would be possible if I didn't have that story and looked for another story? If it sounds like I'm asking you to make a big leap, it's true. But that's what a spiritual way of living and a spiritual perception is. And that's why it's considered by a number of us to be the only real remedy to this. I frequently quote the Course in Miracles. It says whenever, not in exact words, but whenever there's a conflict between any two children of God, it is only necessary for one to regain their sanity in order for both to be saved. What would happen if you, whoever is listening to this, decided that you were going to decide to be that person for both sakes, for all sakes, for your own sake, so that you'd be able to reach the forgiveness for all the things in this world that we haven't scheduled, we haven't planned, and we're not in control of. There's a deeper transpersonal empathy that's possible. And even though relationships may come and go, it'd be nice for them to part ways as we want different things that don't go together. And let's have that be nobody's fault. In Rock Me on the Water, Jackson Browne sings, it's a beautiful song, by the way. Oh, people, look among you. It's there that your hope must lie. You're waiting for someone other than you to be the one to care, to be the one to try. Don't give up reaching for the best in yourselves when things feel so horrible. If you can truly want to do it for yourselves and the others and bring the best out in yourself and each other's, I can't guarantee the results of that, but it won't make things worse. And it can make a lot of things better. Do it in your mind. Do it in your heart. Do it with your words. Do it with not reacting. Do it with patience. Do it with curiosity. Do it with reflective listening. Do it with active listening. We have to reach through all the things that separate us painfully, or we're going to be stuck with that outcome. Another beautiful thing is possible. I train myself as a student of the Course whenever I'm upset or terrified or at odds with what there is. I could have peace instead of this. I could have peace instead of this. So please show me another way. If we do that for ourselves, there's freedom. And if we do that for others, there's such a beautiful blessing. Thanks again. I hope that works. I know that's a lot of concepts, and some of it's abstract, and I'm doing it in a compressed space. It could be a 3-hour workshop. If you'd like us to work on this and really make it rubber hits the road, grounded and real, or you want some clarity, please, I will be delighted if you ask me. And I'll be delighted to have a reason to show up and respond and to somebody who really wants to know, really wants to try it, or really wants to report back on their results. Thank you so much, all of you, for being here. And if you think somebody you know needs this, please spread the reach. The more you guys do it, the more it'll happen, and the more it can happen. The more you ask me for, the more I have a reason to give it. I appreciate you so much. Thank you. Have a great night.